And so then in verse 9, as he's, so in verse 8, Lot's trying to stop them, talk to the people. And in verse 8, they turned it around. It says, this one came in as an And they said, this one came in as an alien, and already is he acting like a judge. Now we will treat you worse than them. So this is kind of, even though Lot was in and among them, he wasn't one of them. And this is kind of the distinction that happens. This is why God was able to pull him out. He hadn't fully become one of them. And so God was rescued him out. And they didn't look at him that way. He kind of didn't have this there. But we'll see later that it did impact his family and the way that his daughters looked at things and saw answers for their problems. But the angels, reached. They brought him back in. Now these guys were struck with blindness. That's kind of pretty rough, right? They're out there, and all of a sudden now they're blind, and so they can't get anywhere. So after they struck them blind, Lot went out and he tried to gather up. The angels told him what was happening. They're going to destroy the city. And so Lot went out and he gathered up his daughters and he tried to get his sons-in-laws and get them up, and they just laughed at him and thought he was crazy. They're hanging out. Today's the day, just like every other day. They didn't want to hear from this crazy old man. They didn't know what he was talking about, whatever. And they laughed. And it didn't matter. It was going to happen anyhow, whether they believed it or not. God's judgment was coming upon them, and they had their chance to get out. They didn't heed the warning, and they got destroyed in with the valleys of Sodom and Gomorrah. So then it was the next morning, and the angels got everybody together, and they were like, all right, come on, let's get together, let's get everybody out of here. And Lot hesitated, and so they grabbed him. They physically grabbed him and forced him out, it says, and they drug him out of there. Really didn't give him a choice, and it says that this is because, it says in verse 29 that this happened because God remembered Abraham, and he saved Lot and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow. So this was important. This didn't have as much to do with Lot as it did with Abraham. So Abraham was able to intercede on behalf of Lot. And this is one of these very first places where we see this taking place, where someone's interceding for another person with God, where it wasn't Lot, wasn't anything Lot did that merited him the favor. I guess he did. He invited the angels in and gave him safe haven, but that's not why he was saved. He was saved because Lot interceded for him with the Lord back when he was counting. Remember, we talked about the size of the family and stuff like that. And he knew Lot was down there, so he got him out of there. And this is another thing that I noticed too, is that God did make this promise to Abraham that he wouldn't kill the righteous with the unrighteous, and that if there were 10 people in the city, he wouldn't destroy the city for their sake. So what was God's solution to this? Well, he got the 10 people out. There was nobody left. And it wasn't 10 people. It was maybe 7 or 8 that got out with Lot. But he went and he just got them out of the city and destroyed the city anyhow, because the city was so corrupt. So there's a certain point where, that's it. God says the spirit will not always strive with man, and this was it. He got to that point, and that was it. It was done. And he came down. Now, when Lot went to go leave, he was told he had to go run and make it into the mountains, and he said there's no way he was going to be able to make it there in time. I guess he had, drag his daughters and his wife and stuff up there. And there was a little town, and they keep stressing it was small, and the name Zoar means small, and that's what they wound up calling it. And that was that one king that was there that we talked about. And his land was saved simply because Lot asked for it. So here again, someone else is interceding on behalf of somebody else. So Abraham interceded on behalf of Lot, and Lot survived. And now Lot interceded on behalf of Zoar and the king of Zoar and all the people there, and they survived. So Lot fled there, and the king received him, and he spent the night and whatever. And then the next day he went and he fled to the mountains anyhow, because the destruction was so great, he was afraid of it. Now, as they were going into Zoar, it was the next morning, so they had traveled all day to get to even Zoar. And so the sun was coming up, it was the next day, and then the fire and brimstone rained down. And Lot's wife turned around and looked back and said she became a pillar of salt. So However that happened, I don't know. It seems kind of weird. I thought maybe it meant that like she went back to look, but it certainly doesn't mean that. It means that she just turned around and looked. And so that was it. That was enough. It was kind of uh, it was just a miracle of God or a judgment of God that fell on her. And that picture, that stone, that's actually called Lot's wife, and that is over by the Valley of Sodom area. And it's just this individual pillar there, and they say that they call that Lot's wife. So now we're at verse 30, and so Lot left Zoar and he went up to the mountains because that is what he was commanded to do, and he decided he was going to be faithful anyhow. So he went ahead and he went up to the mountains. And while he was up there, his daughters figured that there was no one left. That was it. Everything was dead. So I don't know what was in Zoar. They had just left there. They knew there were people that weren't dead in Zoar. Maybe she thought no one of her family line, no other Jews. I don't know. I don't understand what their problems were. But actually, it was the older daughter who plot and planned it and talked her younger sister into it. She's the one who concocted the scheme. She's the one who got Lot drunk and went into him and all that and had these children. And you see the tribes that they came from. So we have the Moabites and the Ammonites came from them. And the Moabites and the Ammonites have always been a problem for the people of Israel throughout their founding and all that. And we'll see later as we get into it who they were. And it'll reference back to this. This is where they got their beginning. They were the children of this iniquity of Lot's daughters. And so we don't hear much more about them than that. Let me see how much time I'm into this. And I'm into this pretty deep. So yeah, I will get into homosexuality and all that, because that gets a lot into types and all, and it's a lot better to handle that while we're talking about Leviticus and getting into the law, and specifically Leviticus 18 in the list of abominations that homosexuality is listed amongst when it's specifically called out. And we'll deal with it then because it deals with types, and types become really important. And right now we're just establishing the types in Genesis. So we'll get to that soon enough. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me, and I'll do my best to get you an answer. Thank you for joining in. Take care.